Rav Mendy, thank you very, very much for giving me an opportunity to be able to share with you. Rav Shapiro, lovely to see you. Some thoughts about the Queen. I'll be honest. I mean, any time that I've spoken up until now in the last few days, it's only been about 15 minutes. So we're giving shir now on the Queen, right? That's what we're going to do. But I thought, during this time, so if I understand, just so that I'm clear, I always do this, right? Our social contract is 8:30, right? All right. So let's begin. I think it's important, before we talk about the Queen proper, if we're going to do it here in a Beis Medrash. Some of my Chabur students are here, so I have to say Bet Midrash. We have to understand what the Torah says about Malkhut, because it frames everything. Because one of the things that I try to teach my Talmidim is that the Torah for us is a framework for the world. And it is through the lens of Torah that we are to see everything in this world. And so all of these events, these things that come and go, and let's be honest, the Queen, she had the longest reign of anyone in her line. The British monarchy is 1,000 years old, 1,200 to be exact. And of all of her predecessors, all her family, that's also remarkable, right? For 1,000 years, they are extended members of her family that held this throne all the time. She had it the longest. For us, it's a blink of an eye, for the Jewish people, because our history is much, much older than that. But this, along with everything else that we see in the world, our challenge is to be able to see it within the framework of the Torah. Because that's the nature of our Brit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say by the Milah, when we have Brit Milah, a very interesting bracha. The bracha is, Asher Kedesh Yedid Mi Beten V'chok B'She'ero Sam. Right? That's the main bracha of the Milah. We talk about the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu established with us a Brit, Kedesh Yedid Mi Beten, from the womb, a Yedid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we say, Al Ken B'Schar Zo El Chai Chelkenu. In the schar of this is Fardi Nusach. Yeah? The schar of the fact that we maintain this Brit with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tzaveh lehatzil yididut she'erenu mishahat. You, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please command to save us all from annihilation. Now, I read that bracha and I think it's a very strange bracha to say to Brit Milah. Here it's a huge simcha. We're machnis, another member of our people, for 4,000 years from Avraham Avinu into Brit, and that's what we say at the Brit Milah. Save us from destruction. Yes, that's what we say, and for a very good reason. Because the reality is, all things pass. All things pass. No matter how long they go, they come to an end. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking us in Brit is to keep going. And that means that we, Am Yisrael, we cannot have any comforts. What do I mean by that? Not that we can't be comfortable. We can't hold any security blankets with us. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world moves. Vahi bin Soah Ha'aron. That's why the badim of the Aron were not allowed to be removed. There's two mitzvot in Parashat Truma. One is, b'tabe'ot Aron yu badim. The badim have to be in the rings of the Aron, lo yasuru mimen. They're not to be removed. And that is an eternal mitzvah, because all of the other mitzvot that are local to the building of the Mishkan are not counted. The Rambam doesn't count in them. The main monea mitzvot don't count them. This mitzvah, that's counted. Why? Because the Torah is always in motion. It always has to be ready to be in motion, because we, Am Yisrael, are always in motion. And the reason is because we are with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world from Yom Rishon until the last day with us. And so we can't camp out at any point of that journey and say, okay, now I'm comfortable. So what we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, look, if we're in this with you, which we are, which is why we're bringing this child into Brit Milah, you have to keep us from annihilation. And the truth of the matter is, the very fact that we're here, able to talk about this queen who lived for 70 years and continues a 1,000-year line, we watched it all. And we will continue to see it all. Because when we go to the British Museum, we also saw that. Every single room in that museum. It's all part of our history. So for us, this is an observation. We are observing as we always do. And the way that we observe is through the lens of the Torah. And so we have to understand Malkhut through the lens of the Torah. Of course, I'm not going to present to you the entirety or exhaustive treatment of it, but I will share with you some aspects of Malkhut that the Torah teaches us. And through that, to be able to understand that Her Majesty the Queen, in my humble opinion, was a great monarch. I believe one of the greatest that has ever lived. So there's a midrash. I'm sure you've heard the midrash, many. It's a well-known midrash. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with Adam HaRishon, and he was showing Adam HaRishon every neshama that was going to come into the world. Right? There's many reasons for that. We're not going to get into why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing that. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing with Adam HaRishon. Neshama after neshama after neshama, and then all of a sudden, the neshama of David HaMelech comes. Adam HaRishon sees the neshama of David HaMelech. It's meant to live for one day. One day. This is a splendid neshama. This is neshama of David Melech Israel. The Mashiach that we're waiting for. Refer to always, Ben David. One day. And that's precisely what Adam HaRishon says, according to Chazal. Adam HaRishon sees this neshama. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel Olam. Such a splendid neshama. One day. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yes, one day. Now, Adam, if you're interested, you can give of the years of your life to this neshama if you like. Adam says, I can do that. I said, you could do that. Mutar lecha. So Adam HaRishon says, I give 70 years of my life to this neshama. And that's what was. David HaMelech lived for 70 years. Adam HaRishon was supposed to live for 1,000 years. He lived for 930 years. V'kacha. It's a remarkable midrash. Among the things that one can learn from this midrash is this, very clearly, and that is that the life of a king, and who is a quintessential king to Israel, if not David HaMelech? He is the Melech. The life of a Melech has no years of his own. The life of a Melech is powered entirely by the lives of the people, which is what Adam HaRishon symbolizes, right? Adam HaRishon is the entirety of humanity for all intents and purposes. Chazal say every neshama essentially was included in him, which is another understanding as to why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is showing him, right? He's essentially showing Adam HaRishon himself. But ultimately, what that teaches us is that the life of a king has nothing of its own. And it is entirely powered by the people over whom the king or sovereign or monarch, or in this case a queen, reigns. The Zohar says it in a different way. Mekubalim say, Malkhut letla migarma klum. Malkhut has nothing of its own. Garma in Aramaic is bone, right? So in Hebrew also, right? Lashon HaKodesh, atzmi is myself. Eitzim is a bone, right? Letla migarma klum. Malkhut has nothing of its own. So that is a fundamental reality of Malkhut. And any time that we have seen that a Melech has not understood that and was not prepared to relinquish his own life for the Malkhut, it has been a spectacular failure. One of the Melachim that we have that exemplifies this other side of it is Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech, Chazal say, it was because he did tshuva at the end of his life that he is recognized as part of the great kings of Israel. But it's important to be able to know the story of Shaul. But I'm not going to begin the story before the time that it takes for us to have a moment of silence for the queen. But what we need to know about Shaul is that he was a reluctant king from the beginning. So I don't want to, we have 15 seconds. So if everybody wants to...
You want the point.
All right. So, okay, have a moment of silence. A quick recap of the broad strokes of the story will be important for our purposes. So Shmuel HaNavi has to answer the request of the people, which both he and HaKadosh Baruch Hu were extremely dismayed with. The people want a king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not happy with it. Shmuel is even more not happy with it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Shmuel, he says, it's not you that they're upset with. It's me. Oti ma'asu. They're sick of me, Shmuel. We will give them their king. I will tell them what it will mean to have a king. It's not going to be pretty or fun, but they can have him. But if they are good and they are right, the king will be a good king. And it will go okay for them. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Shmuel. And as the story goes, Shaul has lost some donkeys, and he's got to go find them. So he's off finding them. It's particularly more precisely his uncle lost the donkeys. He's going to find the donkeys for his uncle. And it says, they're on the path, and his helper that's with him says, the Ro'eh lives just over there. So they used to call the Navi a Ro'eh in that time, right? And it's amazing because they thought, well, let's go ask him. Which is, you're asking the Navi where your donkeys are? Surely he's got better things to do. I always say to my Talmidim, when they ask me, sometimes they ask me, where is this halakha, or where is this page, or whatever, and they say, I'm sorry. So look, if Shmuel can tell Shaul where his donkeys are, I could tell you what daf the halakha is on. We're not better than Shmuel and Navi. So he sees Shmuel, he ends up sitting with Shmuel, eating with Shmuel, he spends the night in Shmuel's house. Shmuel the next morning, he's walking back with Shaul, and he says, tell your lad you should go on. Tell him to walk forward. And there's a private moment between Shmuel and Shaul. And Shmuel takes out shemen, takes out oil, and he anoints Shaul there. And he says, when you turn from me, niyet al-ish aher. When you turn around, you will become another man. The Rambam says, Lev melech, lev kol kehal Yisraelhu. The heart of a king is the heart of the entirety of the kahal of Israel, which is reminiscent of our midrash, which is what Shmuel was saying to Shaul. He says, you're going to turn around, you're another man. You are no longer a private citizen. You are now Rosh Shivtei Israel, which comes back to haunt him. Because one of the things that Shmuel says to Shaul that he must do is that there is going to be a time in which he will bring a korban. He's going to have to bring a zebach. And he says, listen to me. You bring the zebach, do not eat until I get there. Do you understand me? Shaul said, okay, I understand. Fast forward to the event. Shaul's there. He brings the zebach. He's waiting for Shmuel. The people are getting restless. He's being a little bit late. So let's eat. We want to eat. Now, looking at the watch. He's getting more nervous. He's got a lot of pressure. The people are pressuring him. I said, okay, let's eat. And all of a sudden he turns around, and guess who's coming up the road? It's Shmuel. And it's there. People think that it's later on. It is there where Shmuel says, it's over for you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has decided that this reign, this line will end. And he will look for somebody, Re'acha hatov mimecha. We're going to find somebody who's one of your brethren who's better than you. Very harsh, very stark responses. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to find somebody kelibi. Again, this is all about a heart. Kelibi, like my heart, not this man. And then it goes further, and I'm sure, the story of Shaul and Amalek. when he's told, Mehavila ad Shur, you have to wipe out Amalek from this area. Mehavila ad Shur. And he keeps the king alive. And Shmuel comes to him again. And he says, did you do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked you to do? He said, yes, I did. He said, I hear a lot of sheep in the background. What is that? He goes, oh, that sheep. Yeah, no, that's from Amalek. I mean, I know you told us to destroy it, but we thought how nice it would be to bring some korbanot. To which Shmuel says, you really think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is interested in korbanot more than he's interested in you listening to him? Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say things and move back on them. And then he says to Shaul these fateful words, and this is important. He says to Shaul, Im katonata ba'anecha. Shaul, if you think you are small in your eyes, Rosh Shivtei Yisrael ata. You are the head of the tribes of Israel. Act like it. And he's ready to turn away, Shmuel. And even then, even after all of that, Shaul is worried about what? His public perception. And he says, Shmuel, please, don't go. Come and bow with me before the people. And Shmuel says, I'm not bowing with you before the people. You messed up. He begs him. And Shmuel comes and bows with him before the people. And Chazal say that Shmuel got onish as a result of that. Because he was dragged into Shaul's own personal needs. Why is this such a problem? Shaul was so worried about himself and his approval and who he was in the eyes of the people that he could not allow himself simply to be the monarch of the people, simply to hold the space that was Rosh Shivtei Israel and recognize that nothing about his personal elements were important here. It was about the people. And he was the emergent representative of these people. And he couldn't get it. From day one, he was Nechbai la Kelim. From day one, they tried to crown him. They couldn't find him because he was hiding in the closet with the luggage. And it continued throughout the short term of his reign. And that's why Shmuel said, you need to hold. There are going to be major issues that move you, that push you, that try you to shift and run against all of the tides that are coming your way. You must not falter. You are not a private citizen. You are the manifestation of this entire nation. Rosh Shivtei Yisrael ata. And if you cannot do that, you will not stay. And Shaul could not do it. And he did not stay. Until the very end of his life. He redeemed himself at the very end of his life when there was a war with Amalek. And he went to war. And Shmuel told him, this whole story, he brought Shmuel up from the dead. And Shmuel said to him, he said, tomorrow, you and your son Yonatan, you're with me. And Shaul could have very easily said, okay, so I'm not going to war tomorrow. But that's not what he did. In his final hour, he finally gave himself for his people. And he died in war. And Chazal say beautiful midrash on that. Listen to this beautiful midrash. Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought all of the Malachei HaSharet to watch this. Shaul marching into war. And he said to all of the Malachei HaSharet, he says, Re'u yikaro shel basar v'dam. He says, I want you to see how precious and beautiful this human that I created was. And in that, Shaul redeemed himself. And he was counted among the great kings of Israel because in the end of his life, he was able to give himself for the people in death. But he did. David HaMelech, on the other hand, was the quintessential king. He was the youngest. The whole Cinderella story comes from David HaMelech. Literally, it's not a joke. That's literally where they lifted it from. Like every other great story that was ever told by anybody was taken from our Tanakh. And that's exactly what happens. Shmuel goes, he has to anoint them. He wants to anoint a new king. And he's got an earpiece, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's talking to him while he's sitting with everybody. And Yishai has all of his sons, each one strong, big, tall. And Shmuel says, surely this one. He goes, lo, not him, not him, not him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not him. Nobody's it. Nobody. You told me to come here. I went through all of the kids already. None of the boys are supposed. He says, there's another one. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yeah. Shmuel says, you have anybody else? And Yishai, only, the youngest kid back with the sheep also again. He goes, call him in. David HaMelech walks in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the ear of Shmuel, Kum, Mshahehu, Kizehu. Get up, anoint him. He's the one. So David from day one. It says in the Pasuk, David hu HaKatan. David was the small one. David never had any heirs about him. Never had any heirs about him. And one of the strongest things that we find with David is when he brings the Aron from Hebron down to Yerushalayim. Right after the incident with Peretz Be'uzah, he comes back to bring it down to Yerushalayim, and he's dancing. It says, David mecharkes bechol oz. He was dancing with every fiber of his being, bringing down the Aron to Yerushalayim. And it says, Vehu hagur ephod bad. He was just wearing nothing more than a linen tunic. He was the king of Israel, Rosh Shivtei Yisrael, which took very seriously. He wasn't wearing any royal garb. He's going to wear this in front of the Aron Brit Hashem. In front of the Aron Brit Hashem, everybody is laid low. En kavod, ben melucha, in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was wearing a simple linen tunic and dancing with every fiber of his being. And it says that as he was dying, there was a touch exposed. So kicking his feet up, his legs, and so on. And he married, of course, the daughter of Shaul, the king, Michal. And she's watching him from the window. And he comes home, and she says, Ma nichbad hayom. Cynically, right? Because remember who her father was. Her father would never be caught dead doing something like that. Never. In a million years would Shaul allow himself to be seen in public like that. And his daughter, the queen now, says to David, oh, how honorable the day that you dance like one of the riffraff. And David says to her, Benakloti od mizeh. You're telling me that I shouldn't dance in front of the Aron Brit Hashem? It's too special? I'm too big to be able to. I would push myself down even further and dance with the lowest of our people. Not like your father, he says, who was pushed off the throne in my favor. It was the most stark thing David had ever said to Michal. It's in the Psukim. It's all there. That's why I have to learn Tanakh. Tanakh. It's important. That was David HaMelech. David HaMelech had absolutely no ego, no heirs, no anything. He was the king. And being the king meant that Lev Melech, Lev Kol Kehal Yisrael. And that, it's amazing because all of the Goyim, they just wanted our monarchy. They learned Tanakh, they read it. And when they modeled their Malkhut, who did they model it after? Ours. And so they anoint their kings, which I'll talk about in a moment. But there is an understanding from those stories, because those stories are very clear, they're very blatant, that a good king, a good sovereign, sacrifices his or her life for the people. And here I will talk about Her Majesty, the Queen. Her late Majesty literally sacrificed her personal life for this country. When she was anointed, and they anoint, right? I had the fortune of, many times I was in the Tower of London, but one night we had a dinner for something, and we were able to see the crown jewels not on the conveyor, yeah? We were able to be in the room and go through and so on. And most of the things in the crown jewels and everything along with them, they're not so much more than 17th century, because after the Civil War and they overthrew the monarchy with Charles I, they either sold it or melted it down. They didn't care about keeping it. So they had to remake all of it for Charles II. There's one thing There's one item that is 900 years old. It's a golden spoon. And it is the spoon that is used to anoint the kings of England. They felt not so good to melt that down. They thought maybe this we shouldn't melt down. And so it's on display. You don't usually see it because you're on the conveyor, but it was nice. We had the ability to see it. And there's this gold spoon that is the spoon of anointing. Now, one thing I will say, like you mentioned about the Queen, is that she was a God-fearing woman. She was probably the last European monarch to genuinely believe that her role was a divine calling. And she did believe that God was with her and that God expected her to fulfill this role. So her coronation was the first televised coronation. Obviously, there wasn't TV really before, but there was a bit of controversy about it. And Prince Philip insisted that it was the right thing to do, and he coordinated all of it. And all of it was on TV. Everything was televised except for one part that she insisted should not be televised. And that was the anointing. She was wearing an ephod bad, only nothing more than a linen tunic. And that was done, it's done by Ahurei Pargod, right behind everyone. It's done very privately. She did it with tzniut. She didn't want that to be publicized because to her, that was the most sacred part of the entire proceedings. All of that, of course, whether she knew consciously or not, she gets from us. But she took it seriously. And that made a very big difference. And I believe, and this is just me, her heart was a different heart after that. And there's a beautiful, if I can pull it up, there was a beautiful, I read a biography of the Queen years and years ago. And one of the things that she says to a friend, she writes in a letter to her friend, they quote the letter, she says, I don't know what it is, but after that, I lost all of my anxiety and all of my fear and all of my timidity. I don't know what happened, but I no longer have it. It's the heart of a queen. And she was genuinely a great queen. And one of the reasons, if not the central reason, why she was so great is because she sat, when they placed that crown on her head, and the choir sang Zadok the priest, or for us, Tzadok HaKohen, right, which is from Handel. It's all us. It's all ours. Everything's ours, right? She put up everything that she ever wanted for herself as a young girl, every possible opportunity and experience that would be personal and unique to her. Everything that you and I not only would wish for, but fiercely fight to keep for ourselves in our own life, she put up on the altar of her people as tribute, in no uncertain terms. And in exchange for that, she received the majesty of the people in her heart and in her trust. And Morai v'Rabotai, for those of us who witnessed it, first of all, we will likely never witness any kind of thing like that again, to that degree, to that wholeness in our lives, until Yavo Mashiach ben David Tzidkenu l'havdil elef havdalot. But this is what she did. And every single day of her entire life, until the last hour of the last day when she greeted Liz Truss, literally a day before she died, she dedicated herself to her people. And she did it without airs, without arrogance, without expectations and requirements. She did it with humility and service and dedication. And you don't have to take my word for it, because all of you saw it and know it. And that we must be clear and true and recognize it's a remarkable thing. It's a remarkable thing. Because we just don't see things like that very often in our days. I believe that we witnessed, and people said, she had no power, which we can talk about in a moment, but this is the essence of Malkhut. Malkhut let la migarma klum. Malkhut has nothing of its own. Go find somebody who could do it. Look at the rest of the royal family. They didn't have it so easy. It wasn't so easy for them. The queen, in all of the political and social upheaval, in wars, in family turmoil, in all of it, she held. Day in and day out, the red boxes. Day in and day out, her engagements. And how many plaques did she uncover? And how many ribbons did she snip? And how many... Oh, day in and day out. So for us, as Am Yisrael, to be able to see some element of Malkhut genuinely presented, it's why Chazal said, you have to say a bracha. You see something like that, lo davar katanu. It's not a small thing. You see something like that, you should genuinely say, shechalak mikvodo lebasar v'adam. Do you know what it means to say that in a bracha? Shechalak mikvodo lebasar v'adam? That's got to be real. And that's why Chazal say, oh, it is real. These concepts that Torah teach us about Malkhut, you will find manifest in Basar Vadam. And when you find it manifest in Basar Vadam, say a bracha. Because for us, it's always about Kavod HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how we see that in the world. And that's what we were zocheh to see. And it's something that the rest of the world recognizes on some level or another, because in the entire world, for pretty much the entirety of her reign, if you said the queen, there was no question about who you were talking about. And there's more queens in the world than just her. Nobody asked. Nobody had any question as to who we were talking about. It was only her. And so I will end with this point. Coming back to Am Yisrael again. We're older, we're more ancient, and we will continue through, dare I say, even when it may come a day that the British monarchy is not anymore what it once was. Am Yisrael, lo yitosh Adonai amo v'nachalato lo ya'azov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never, ever leave Am Yisrael. We are an indestructible people. Now that is not to say that we have not had casualties. Bechol dor vador omdim alenu lechalotenu. And oh my, have the casualties been staggering. We just read of the prediction of them on Shabbat last week, this last Shabbat. We signed it in blood. But there is one thing that's important for us to remember. First of all, it's okay to take chizuk from the queen. She served. We are living in a world today where so many of us are thinking about, what can I get out of this? How can I do something for me? And that's okay. Why? Because as Hillel HaZaken said, Imen anili mili. That's also a teaching of Chazal. But of course, the end of that is ukshani le'atzmi, which means when I am only for me, mani. What have I got left? Service. Service. We are bnei melachim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Chazal teach us that we should look at ourselves as royalty. That doesn't mean that we should be arrogant. What it means is we should have a sense of Malchut let la megarma klum, and that our job is service. What can we do for this great, illustrious, ancient institution that we call Klal Yisrael? What can we do? And every one of us can do something. Not just for us, not just our own learning, not just our own mitzvot, not just our own family, not just our own. What can we do for the klal, for the enterprise that is Klal Yisrael? Every single one of us is a member of the royal family. And it's important for us to be able to consider that and draw chizuk from her. She set an example. We can do something like that. Humbly, faithfully, truly. And finally, a bit of a harsh reality, but nonetheless important to know. The promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with Klal Yisrael, go back to the beginning, of the Brit, is not a promise to you and me as individuals. There are no guarantees to me or you. There are guarantees to the Klal. Am Yisrael is going nowhere. You can bet your bottom I usually say bottom dollar, but okay, bottom, you don't say bottom pound. In any case, your last penny on that. Klal Yisrael is going nowhere. It is an indestructible people. You and me, as Mordechai said to Esther, tu bet avich, I can't tell you how that's going to go. Revach v'atzala yavo leYehudim mimakom acher. We'll be fine as a klal. And what's important for us to consider is, what do I need to do to genuinely be engaged with the klal? And I will say that another thing that the queen did was that she embraced the entirety of her kingdom. The different ethnicities, the different religions, the different people. And for us, it's also important to embrace the entirety of our klal. We don't have to agree. We don't even have to have dinner together. We don't have to hang out. But it's important to remember that at the base of Klal Yisrael are the people. The people. How do we know that? Once a Jew, always a Jew. You can't take that back. It never goes away. That is at the core. It's not Abraham's students, it's Abraham's children. And as the Rambam writes in a letter, very, very hard, very strongly, he writes in Nigeret Teman, because there was in Teman a rabbi who told the people that if they show that they're Muslim outright, that they're going to be lose all of their mitzvot and so on and so forth. So the Rambam writes to them and he says, first of all, it's not true. And the fact that he said things disparaging about you, he should remember that Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshaya HaNavi, Eliyahu HaNavi, who were Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, says the Rambam, they were punished because they said a few disparaging things about Klal Yisrael. And they had good reason to. So for us, we have to remember that. Part of our service is to embrace the Klal. You don't have to have dinner with everybody. You don't have to spend time with everybody. You don't have to hang out. Don't speak badly about Klal Yisrael. You can disagree. That's fine. You can say, I don't think it's a good thing that this group of the Jewish people are doing. That's fine. Don't speak badly about children of Avraham Avinu. Serve. And recognize that at the base of it all, everybody else, omdim lechalotenu. We can't be that. We can disagree. We can hold our strong values and ideas. Absolutely. We don't have to agree with the family. We can be strong about what it is that we feel and argue, right? We care. Why? Because we care. But we can't speak badly about Klal Yisrael. And if we invest in the Klal that way, we too, personally, become part of the entirety that is the Klal. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share some of these Divrei Torah with you and to be able to remember Her Majesty the Queen, Rav Mendi. I thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish you continued Hatzlacha, B'chol Ma'aseh Yadecha, B'chol Asher Yifneh, Yaskil V'yatzliach, and so too the entire Shtiebel. It should have Hatzlacha, V'ravacha, B'chol Tuv, B'chol Ma'asehem. Amen. Ken Yeh Ratzon.
מלך מלכי המלוכים בשמיים ובארץ אנו חברי הקהילה הקדושה הזו יחד עם כל חברי הקהילה העברית המאוחדות של חבר העמים אבלים וחייבים אסתילוסו של גביוסנו הריבוני סמלכו אליזבת השנייה שנלקחה לבואי סולמו בעידן של שקועים עמוקים היסמלו יציבוס בזמנים של שרה סדר וצדק ובזמני מסך נדיבוס רוח כי מגינס ואמונו, וכבר לעס וחושס מחויבוס בלתי פויסקס, הישמרו בגבוי מהחירוס, היסוס סמל ויחדוס, והיגו צדק בכל ארצו, אוי שלטוינו. אוי זולבושו, פיה פוסחו בחוכמו, ודיני חסד על לשונו, צויפיו הליכוי צומוסו, ולחם עצמו סלובו יאכלו, וחייה היא יסום עלכו עטיבו ביוסן, שיושבו על כיס ההסתיידוס מהכבוד, ומויסו יגרוצוין, שבונשתות יוינס מויסוינום, לחיויס יחד, בצדק ובשונוים, יגרוצוין מלפונך, שתמציא ליועל מלכוסו, המלכו, אליזבת השנייה, מלוכה שלמה, ליועל מגיים, תחס הגונס, כנפי שכינוסך, ונאמר אמן. אנו saying to Shua למלוכים וממשלו לנסיכים. מלכוסו מלכוס כל העולמים, הוא יברך our sovereign Lord King Charles, Queen Consort, and all the royal family. מלך מלכי המלוכים ברחמוב, יחייהו וישמרהו מכל צורו ויגון יצילהו, ויברך וישמואל לצבא המלך, וייתן בליבו ובלב כל יועצוב, רוח חוכמה ובינו להחזיק שלום המלכוס, ושלווה סמוי ולעשויס חסד ואמס עם כל ישראל. ויאמרו ויאמנו, יפרוי סובינו שבשמיים, סוכס שלום על כל יושבי תבל, ובוא לציין גואל ונאמר אמן.